Okay. And as I started getting into the industry, I was immediately kind of ingrained with the Dave Ramsey philosophy. Debt's dumb, cash is king. I think the phrase is the paid off home mortgage has replaced the BMW as the status symbol. And that was my thing. I was like, if you pay off all your debt, you can be financially free because you won't have debt and you're not supposed to owe anybody anything. So you want to pay off all your debt. So I was doing the baby steps. And my story was, I was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider for a number of years. And so I would teach people to do their baby steps. I would teach people to pay off their debt. And I would teach people to walk through each of those steps. But personally, I was always stuck on baby step 2. Okay, save $1,000, then pay off every single last bit of debt you have other than your mortgage. And then you start saving your emergency fund. And what would happen is I would get the $1,000. I had it in my envelope. We literally did this thing like by the book. We had the envelopes lined out, all of that stuff. And we would get the $1,000. We'd start chunking away at debt. And then something would happen. Okay, one of the somethings was one of our vehicles broke. So we had $1,000 cash. $1,000 does not buy a new vehicle. So what did we had to do? We had to go to the dealership and go get more debt because we didn't have enough money saved to actually acquire the vehicle. Okay, same thing with my business. When I started in business, I remember my first debt with the business. I was supposed to fly down to Minnesota, and again, Lexi's vehicle broke. And this is turning into unreliable vehicle story too. We're going to talk about vehicles tonight. But we had the vehicle break. That repair was $2,500. The ticket to Minnesota for all the hotel, all of that stuff, that would have been $2,500. We had to fix Lexi's car. And so we upped our limit on the Visa card. We got $2,500 literally worth of credit, one-way ticket down, hotel room, all that stuff. And that was like the next debt we had. And it just started growing, accumulating. And I remember being a Dave Ramsey guy, like, oh man, I'm a Dave Ramsey guy, but I just had to get debt. I don't know what to do. I feel like a hypocrite. How do I handle this? How do I pay it off? And so we started just, again, going crazy, trying to throw money at the debt. And we got really good at it. I remember we paid off our first vehicle. Okay, we had a vehicle that we purchased, I think it was in 2015. It was a used vehicle. It was it the VW or the Suzuki we paid off? The Suzuki. So in the same summer, when we started making money, we paid off a Suzuki, and then we bought a Buick for cash. And I remember feeling the level of achievement, yes, we just paid off a car. We were so pumped. And as I started learning about finances throughout that year, I realized when we went to go sell that Suzuki that I paid 12 for it and we could only sell it for 6. And I started questioning, should we really have paid that vehicle off? I put $6,000 of my own money into it and I couldn't even sell it for what I bought it for. Essentially, it devalued my money faster than inflation would have. So when you look at debt, what happens here is people are so focused on it that either they put all their attention on it, they don't build wealth because they're focusing on being debt-free, or they put all their attention on it to the degree that they're paralyzed and do nothing, and they just sit there swimming in debt, paying interest and never investing. So if you're watching this tonight, I want to share with you, I believe the very first investment that you should make is paying off debt. And not from the standpoint of live below your means and never have debt, never owe anybody. It's, you probably don't understand anything about investing yet. So if you think about investing, you would invest because you're trying to earn cash flow, you're trying to earn an interest rate, you're trying to make, money back or earn more money so that you don't have to work for it. If you pay off debt and debt has interest, when you pay it off early, you're saving that interest. That's an investment. Okay, when you pay off a debt balance, you free up the payment. That's cash flow. So it has a yield and it has an internal rate of return just like an investment does, but it's an investment that you can't screw up. So when you pay off your debt, there's no way that you can be like, oh, I didn't know how this thing worked and now I'm in trouble because I don't know how to manage it. It was just the balance. It's gone now. It's super easy. So we're going to walk through tonight, paying off debt, how to do it, but how to do it right so that at the end of the day, you're not broke. And that's really the focus. So I'm going to go to our first slide here. So here's some of the facts on debts. I wanted to give you guys these. I studied these over the week here. So the average credit card per household right now is $6,741 on outstanding balances. So balances that do not get paid off at the end of the month. Okay, if you include non-outstanding, it actually goes up to about $15,000 if you include total. All right. Now in this statistic, Alaska is actually number 1 in the country for credit card debt. We have the highest credit card debt per capita out of any state. So we've got the balance on average credit cards for Americans at just under $7,000. Okay. Mortgage debt, we've got that right around 185. That's the average mortgage debt per household. Average household has 27,630 in auto debt. Student loan debt, check this out. The average American household has $47,000 in student loan debt. Okay, we're going to talk student loan debt tonight as well. And then the average household's total debt, when you average it amongst all of the debt for all of the households in America, the average household has $135,000 in debt. The total U.S. citizens' outstanding debt is $13.67 trillion. Trillion with a T, guys, like million, billion, then trillion. That's a lot of debt. Okay, so that's the amount of debt that's out there right now. So the reason I show this is it shows this is a problem. Everyone has debt. The average American has $137,000 in debt. That's interest they're going to pay. Okay, that's not only interest they're going to pay, that's cash flow that's going towards typically a liability that if they were to get rid of, they'd have that cash flow back. And here's the kicker. You guys know how I feel about banks. That 136 that the entire country collectively owes, that 13.6, that's not even real money. When you borrow money from a bank, they didn't have money. Okay, so a bank has no money without depositors, which means you're borrowing your own money and paying them interest to use your own money. Okay, it cracks me up. We do this sacred account, it's life insurance, and people are like, why would I borrow my own money and pay interest to use it? It's like you're already doing that and you profit nothing on it. So these are the statistics on debt, just to give you proof and evidence that it's a real thing. So why do we have debt? Okay, debt happens when income and savings does not. Debt happens when income and savings does not happen. And this is talking about individuals. It's not talking about corporations. Corporations and investors use debt differently. And so when you look at an individual consumer basis, debt happens when savings does not. Your debt, when you're watching this tonight, because I talk to people all the time, they're in victim mode on their debt. I've got all this debt. It's not my problem. Like bad stuff happened up with it. And it's like, well, no, you signed up for the debt. You caused the debt. The debt was something you willingly agreed to. So as we're watching this tonight, if you're in victim mode, I want you to take that off really quick. And I want you to instead take a standpoint of personal responsibility. If you've got debt, you signed up for it. It was your deal. You knew you were signing up for it. Nobody tricked you. It was your choice. So your debt is your responsibility. You are 100% the reason why you have it. And as you're watching this, I don't want you to write off anything I'm saying just because you're being a victim of your situation. Like take responsibility. That's the only way you're going to fix it. So think about it. If you have debt at one point, it's because you were insolvent, meaning you had no money. If you were solvent, you would not had to have borrowed money from somebody else. So you went to somebody else who was solvent. You used their money because you didn't have money. As a consumer with debt, that's the only reason debt happens. The only reason. So if you're insolvent, that's the real issue. People will look at their debt problem and they'll be like, hey, I've got debt. That's the issue. That's really just the symptom. Okay, the issue was you had no money at one point. So that if we solve, I'm a symptoms guy. Like if you look at symptoms versus root causes, if we solve symptoms, we don't fix anything. So if the reason you had debt was no money and no income and no savings, and we pay off all of your debt and we don't fix no money, no income, and no savings, what do you think is going to happen? You're right back in debt again. Like it's just a repetitive cycle. So you've got that reason why you have debt. And if you look at the history of debt, like kind of just giving you a background on it so you understand it's not a new thing. Like everyone, when they get debt and accumulate debt, they're like, oh crap, poor me. Like no one else is dealing with this. Guys, people have dealt with debt for thousands of years. Like literally like before Jesus was around, they had debt. So we go all the way back. Debt started out as an agricultural thing where if somebody needed grain, let's say I needed grain and I didn't have grain. I had to travel to the next city to go sell grain at their market. And Tyler had money and Nano had the grain. I would borrow Tyler's money. And the average interest rate was 33%. I would borrow Tyler's money at 33% so I could go get the grain from Nano, go to the next town, sell it at the market, and hopefully make more than 33% so I could pay Tyler back in cash flow. So that's thousands of years old. Like that's cavemen, like way back in the day. So as debt started to be utilized more, it was reformed over time. So we started getting into like the 1700s and the 1800s. With like the religious movement. So it started to become reformed. They would like look at like the Bible says, own nobody, the borrower is slave to the lender, all of that stuff. So a lot of the religious influencers were like, hey, you shouldn't have debt. So at a certain point, I think it was in the 1700s, in certain cultures, it was actually outlawed. You could not lend money to somebody, against the rules. Couldn't do it. And as you started seeing what that did to the economy, people started actually like standing up against that and saying, well, wait, if Nano could have borrowed from Tyler and made money for Nano's family, yeah, he paid Tyler interest, but it benefited Nano too, and it was Nano's decision. So really, the debt wasn't a bad thing at all. So they started to, again, bring it back in. And then as you start to get further into where we're at today, consumer debt, it actually boomed in the early 1900s. So when Henry Ford started producing vehicles, the Model T, that was an expensive car. Like today's money, it's like nothing, right? Like, a couple $100, a couple $1,000, but back then that was a big deal. So people couldn't afford the vehicle just like they couldn't afford the vehicle today. So they would take out automobile loans from Ford and General Motors and these companies. That's how they would acquire their first debt. Okay. And that's really like when it turned into a consumer thing. Because prior to that, it was either you had a farm or you had a mortgage. And if you had a mortgage, like the reason mortgage is called mortgage, the word mort literally means death. So you can kind of see how people felt about mortgages. They're like, man, you're dead if you get one of those, and you're going to have it till you're dead. Like, and they don't do this anymore, but even like several decades ago, people used to have mortgage burning parties. They pay off the house, like they'd get the burn barrel out, they'd burn the bank's paperwork, and they'd celebrate and be like, the mortgage is paid off. So the consumer debt kind of evolved with vehicles, and then credit cards took off in the 1950s. Okay, one of the first credit cards was actually JCPenney. You'd go in, you'd buy your stuff, they'd offer you the retail credit card, and you'd start to actually see that accumulate. And then as you get further into like the 50s, which is kind of when banking evolved, it went from more of a privatized institutional thing into retail consumer based. More and more banks started offering credit cards. Now we have Chase, Visa, Amex, Discover. Like you can literally get a credit card from anybody. So that's kind of the history of where debt came from. And as we look at debt, I do want to kind of itemize. There's good debt. There's bad debt. Who's heard that before? Okay, good debt and bad debt. So good debt, I want to just go through some of the characteristics so that we can all kind of identify what's what. So in no way am I saying all debt is bad. Okay, all debt is not bad. So debt that's good. Debt that's good is debt that makes you money. So to give you an example, if I'm a real estate investor, like when I first heard this, I thought it should be illegal. I was like, when I'm the real estate investor, let's say I buy 100 units. And I borrow money from Mike, and Money Mike gives me the loan, and I go take the loan, I buy the units, and all of the tenants pay me with their income. Okay, so realize my income is not my income, it was their income. So I'm going to pay my mortgage off with their income, and then I'm going to write the interest off of my taxes, even though I used their income to pay it. That's freaking good debt. Like you want that debt. That is a great thing, right? So you have cash flow with that. Good debt also reduces taxes. Okay, so I lease my vehicle. The reason why is I can write off the entire payment on my taxes. I would never want to own a vehicle. I would never want to pay a vehicle that I couldn't write off. So I lease it because I don't want the vehicle. It's going to go down in value. I learned my lesson already, and I'm going to have Uncle Sam cover it. So if it reduces your taxes, it's good debt. Okay. Good debt can be written off as well. So you've got like tax reduction, writing it off. And then you've also got, reducing your overall tax liability. So a lot of corporations will do this. Apple does this all the time. Apple made profits. They made profits outside the US. They don't want to bring those profits into the US. It's cheap to borrow money. They can borrow money at 3%. So rather than using their own capital in the United States, they'll borrow US money and just pay interest because interest is cheaper than taxes. So they're offsetting a tax liability by using debt instead. That's smart. You want to look at that. Good debt, it holds you over to help you make money. So if you have, for example, let's say you have a business idea that you're going to start up, it's going to be profitable. You can't afford to do it. You borrow money from an investor and you pay them back later and it works. That's good debt. There's no issue with that. Okay. And then good debt is affordable. It's debt you can actually maintain your payments on. Your debt to income ratio is not out of whack. Like think about if you borrowed so much money that a lender won't lend to you because of your debt to income ratio, it's no longer good debt because you can't get more of it. Okay. Ultimately, if you can't get more of it, it wasn't good. It stopped you short. Okay. Now let's check out bad debt. Okay. So bad debt purchases liabilities. A liability is anything that does not cash flow and anything that does not go up in value. Okay. So bad debt could be a vehicle, could be a mortgage on a primary residence. It could be a student loan. It could be a credit card. It could be that 0% deal at the furniture store to get your new couch. Like, that's bad debt. It does nothing for you. Bad debt has little to no tax advantages. So you get the debt. It didn't really buy you anything. You also can't write it off. So there's not really a benefit there. Bad debt can't be written off. It slows you down because you're trying to carry and drag this debt around. Okay, like I've talked to people where they have, 200 grand in student loan debt and they don't want to do anything in life because then they can't get their student loan debt forgiven because they'd earned too much income. And if they earn too much income, they can't get the deal done and they can't get the loan forgiven. And they're like, well, I want to get that taken care of. Meanwhile, like, what if you could make $2 million if you really pushed it? But instead, we're focusing on how do I not have to pay the $200,000? So bad debt slows you down. And then ultimately, bad debt's not affordable. So if you can't cash flow with it, if your finances are tight because of your debt payments, that's not a good thing. That means it's bad debt. And a lot of times, especially investors, they'll justify bad debt to say like, oh, hey, I bought a property. Like, I can't tell you guys how many negative cash flow fourplex owners I know. They bought a fourplex. They put literally nothing into it. They don't cash flow. They have a part-time job now. And they're like, oh, well, it's an investment. It's like, is it really though? Like, you're not making any money on it. Okay, maybe you can write some of it off on your taxes, but it's residential, which means that the interest is going to be taxed. Ultimately, you have a standard deduction. So if your itemized can't be higher than your standard, you don't really get a benefit from the interest either. So don't justify debt, guys. That's really the point of this page. If debt doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. You don't need to make a reason why it would. You just get rid of it. All right, so how to handle debt. So we're going to talk through the different types of debt. So first, we have auto loans. So auto loans, you want to lease or finance those in a way where you can write them off. So if you have a business, you lease the vehicle through the business. Okay, you can do that as an LLC. You can do that as a corporation. You will have to personally guarantee the loan, meaning that the LLC is not allowed to do a non-recourse auto loan where you just drop the loan and they can't touch you because it's LLC. They're going to make you sign on it personally. So if you default, they can still come after you. But you don't plan on defaulting. So you're going to lease it through the LLC. You're going to pay it just like you would if you did it yourself. And then you're going to write it off. Now, with the lease, you're financing the depreciation of the vehicle. You're not financing the cost of the vehicle. So they're going to look at if you bought it and it's worth 60 and you plan on turning that thing in 3 years and it's going to be worth 40, that's a $20,000 residual that you're going to finance. And you're going to pay that plus a percentage on interest rate for the factor. And that's going to come up with your lease payment. So you can write the lease payment off on your taxes. Now, you do have to use it for business use. Start a shell corporation and just lease my cars through it. Like, it could work, but if you get audited and you can't prove that that's a business vehicle, guess what? You're going to have back taxes and penalties. Okay. So lease it. You can also finance it through your business. So you can do this with utility vehicles and you can also do this with luxury vehicles. So utility vehicles are vehicles that go over a certain weight limit. They're considered a utility vehicle for the business. You can do a traditional loan on that vehicle and write off the purchase price and a portion of the depreciation as well. Okay. So to give you an example, Lexi has a Silverado. We leased it. Okay. I have a Beamer. We financed it. We're writing both of those off. And the reason why is because the Beamer went over the weight limit. So you can do utility. You can also do luxury. So if you have like an SUV, I think it's over 6,000 pounds, you can also write off a portion of that purchase price. And then you can also deduct that on your taxes for some of the depreciation as well. So that's with vehicles, but you never want to pay one off early. So we just talked about leasing, you're financing the depreciation, which means if it was worth 60 when you bought it and you're going to turn it in and it's worth 40, if you would have bought it in cash, is that a good investment, Tyler? No, you just turned 60 grand into 40 grand over a period of 4 years. That's a terrible investment. So why would you ever pay the vehicle off early? Not only are you paying interest, but you're also depreciating your money faster than inflation. What if I could take that same money and go earn money with it instead? But I'm focused on trying to free up my cash flow. Meanwhile, I'm putting it all into a vehicle that's going to drop down in value. So where when I finally sell it, I've got literally nothing left in it. So you don't want to pay off a vehicle early. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is mortgages. And the reason we're isolating these two first is we're going to talk about the debt buyout system, and mortgages and auto loans are not included in that. Okay. So if you have a 30-year mortgage, which is ideally what you want to get, never do a 15-year, never do a 10. Like those are all principal. You don't want to pay the house off. That's also a bad idea. So do a 30-year mortgage, get the lowest rate you can possibly get, and then never pay the mortgage off. All right. Now you're probably thinking about the equity. You don't pay it off is when you get the mortgage, you can replace it with a first position home equity line of credit, where you get a line of credit for typically 80 to 90% of the home's value. They'll buy out your current mortgage. And what that does is you now have a line of credit on the entire mortgage. Any equity you have, you can borrow against, and your payments now are interest only. So let's say your rate is 6%. You're only paying interest. You're not paying any principal, which means your payments just drop substantially. What's the house going to do over time? It's going to appreciate. So if it's going to appreciate and you've got a fixed balance on your debt and you own it for 10 years, you borrowed on the HELOC at $300,000. When you sell it, it's going to be worth $4,000. You never have to pay it off. You just pay the interest, make sure you maintain it. If you want to pay principal, you can. But the benefit is it's a HELOC. So it's a line of credit. As soon as you pay principal, that money is again borrowable immediately. It's just like the sacred account. As soon as you pay it off, you can pull it right back out again. So you would do that typically on a 10-year term is what most line of credits are going to be. It is interest only. It is variable rate. So that means your interest rate could go down or up based on prime. My thought is that rates can't really go up that much. If you guys have watched, the Fed will raise them by a quarter and then drop them again. The reason why is we did so much damage in 2008 that if we raised interest rates, our country would go into a depression. Okay, all of the money supply would basically dry up. People would stop spending. Prices would drop. Jobs would go away. So our economy is so jacked up that we can't raise rates. It's literally like economically, it would be suicide for our country to do that. So I think rates are going to stay 3, 4, 5%. I would love to borrow against my house at 3, 4, 5%, never pay principal, and I can basically borrow anytime I want to and use that money to go invest instead. Now, the benefit also is if I did that, I don't have private mortgage insurance anymore. Okay, I don't have an escrow payment. And I can go buy my own homeowner's insurance, which means I can shop and I can find out who's actually cheapest instead of just who is the bank compatible with. So I've got all of this equity freed up now. That's why I would never pay off my mortgage. If I pay off my mortgage, yeah, I don't have a payment, but now I've got it just locked up in a bunch of wood on a piece of land. Okay, and again, we've hit this before. The reason you don't want to pay the home off is it's not actually an asset. And it doesn't mean you're wrong for owning a home. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that a home, literally, if you go to the SEC, the Securities Exchange Committee, they will not let you include your primary residence in your net worth. Guys, that's the federal government. If you told them, hey, I'm accredited, check out my net worth, and they see the primary residence, you're off. Like you can't include it. So if you can't include it at that level, we're not going to include it here either. So don't pay it off. It's not worth you owning. It's just worth you living in. Okay, and if I really wanted to own a home, I would never buy one like traditionally. If I really wanted to own a home, I would either do it this way or I would do it through a corporation. I would rent it to myself as a loss and write it off on my taxes there too. Like those are the methods that you should be focusing on. So we're never paying off auto loans. We're never paying off mortgages. Student loans, we pay those off. Credit cards, we pay those off. Medical and consumer, we pay those off. Those are basically the other three categories. You had a question, Mike?
Only balloon loans on real estate.
So that's the right way to do real estate. So basically, like when you do a real estate deal, Grant's a good example. So Grant does not do traditional mortgages. He does 10-year adjustable rate. Interest only for 10 years. That's why the cash flow is so good. He's only paying 5% on the money. Everything else is cash flow. There's no money going to principal because that property is going to appreciate in value. So you don't want to pay money towards principal. When it appreciates, he does a cash out refi, pulls out all of the equity, maxes out the loan again, and just continues to maintain interest only on it. So you can do that. I like the HELOC better. With commercial, they're not going to let you do a HELOC on a commercial unit. It's only residential. So if I have a single family, if I have a duplex, if I have a fourplex, I'm going to try and do a first position HELOC, free up all the equity, and then I'm going to go invest that equity and make money with it. Or if it's just a play where I'm just trying to keep my payment low because I don't really want to put money towards my home, then I'm going to do it that way too. And if you structure your HELOC correctly, your interest can be tax deductible as well. So these are all things to consider. Now, we just talked about the student loans, the credit cards, all the other stuff. This is what we're going to use for the sacred account debt buyout. So when you have your sacred account set up, we're using this first to pay off debt if that's what you have going on. Okay, we have some clients, they're already debt free. They're going to go invest with it. If you have debt and you don't have enough money to invest, then you're not going to use this for investing. Okay, if you have $2,000 in your sacred account and you're like, man, I can go invest, I'll make 12%. 12% of $2,000 is not worth your time. So you need big money to make money with this. So if you don't have 50, 60, 70,000 to invest, just hold off to the side. It'll keep growing and you can use that to pay off your debt. So let's say you've got credit cards, you've got medical debt. Let's say you maybe have some ATVs, different stuff out there. So you're going to take an inventory of all of your debts. Okay, so you're going to list all of them, every single one of them, including your mortgage, including your car, just everything at this point. Just because you need to know what you have. Like I had a guy call me today and he's like, hey, I'm looking at doing a consolidation loan. And I'm like, cool, what do you have? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, all right, well, if you do a consolidation loan, when you're done, it's going to look like you filed for bankruptcy. So you better know what you have before you do the loan, dude. So line them up. You're going to subtract out. So you list all of them. You're going to take the mortgage out. You're going to take the auto loans out. And then I want you to line them up, smallest balance to largest balance. Okay, smallest balance to largest balance. We're not going to pay by interest rate. We're going to pay by balance. And the reason why is you do not pay your bills with interest. You don't invest with interest. So people that are like, well, I want to all of your minimums are what you're paying. People will make the mistake of putting extra money towards their debt. So they'll throw $50 a month towards each of them. Realize that you're not really making progress. You think you are, but you're not. Like by the time you put that money towards it, it reduces the principal barely. And then the interest just kills whatever you did. So you're like, you guys have heard the phrase, like, don't pick a fight with someone that's not your size. So if you can't wipe the debt out, don't even touch it yet. Okay, just pay the minimums. And there's like a lot of the people that are like maybe religious or moral about paying off debt. They're like, well, I have to. Guys, it's not grandma. Like Bank of America said $25 a month. They're cool with $25 a month. It's a business agreement. They're going to make interest on you. You're going to pay them only what they asked for. You'll wipe the debt off when you're ready. But until then, like, why would you be broke and never get out of debt? Because you're focused on how do I pay this thing off sooner with this extra money. So basically pay just your minimums. All of your excess cash goes into your sacred account. Okay, now the reason why is you're going to contribute to your sacred account until you've got enough money in that account to borrow against it and pay off your smallest debt. Okay, now here's the benefit. So borrow against the sacred account, it's still earning interest. So it's earning a 6 to 8% gross annual dividends. And you will maintain earning that even when you've pulled your money out. So it's exactly like that HELOC. If you were to borrow against your house, it doesn't mean your house doesn't keep appreciating. It still does. If you borrowed against real estate, it doesn't mean that you stop earning rent. It still does. So you're borrowing against the sacred account. You're paying off debt. You're earning a 6 to 8% return on it while you're paying the debt off. Simultaneously, you're freeing up cash flow. You're saving interest and you're eliminating that payment. And you'll basically continue to do that till the debt's paid off. Okay, now what this does, the focus here is not speed and it's not saving interest. The focus is solvency. How do we fix the root issue, which was you had no money? So if we take all of the money and apply it directly to the debt and we don't fix the problem of no money, you're going to be back in the same spot. You'll pay off all of the debt, still be broke. Something will happen. You'll get back on the credit cards and you're going to accumulate and get it right back again. Okay. If that, you can argue with that, or you can say, like, scientifically speaking, you had no debt and you ended up in debt, which means if we put you in a vacuum with debt, you're going to end up with the debt. That's how it happened the first time. You didn't start out with credit card debts. You started out debt free and then you accumulated it, which means if we erase all of it, put you back in the same spot and don't fix the behavior and the problem, you're going to end up with the same thing again. Okay, so that's really like the overall initial strategy. So you've paid off the first balance. It's entirely gone. You have the rest of them still there. You're still maintaining your minimums. Okay, still maintaining minimums. And this old debt's freed up. You've got your payment back now. So you're putting money in your sacred account as a contribution into the front end of that policy. But now you've got whatever you used to pay on that debt. Let's say it was $100 a month. That $100 a month, you're going to now pay your loan off early with that money because you borrowed against the sacred account. By paying your sacred account loan off early, that money is reducing the interest on the sacred account. It's increasing your dividend spread. So you're making more in profit and it's immediately available to borrow again. So it's not like you lost it. You can pull that money out tomorrow again if you needed to use it again. So it's basically going to continue earning for you. So you take the old payment, you do that, you're still earning that 6 to 8% return. continue contributing. And then when your balance is big enough to pay off the next largest debt, again, you're going to borrow against to pay it off. Now, guys, with a spreadsheet, but I'm telling you, this plan is super boring. It's not like there's nothing sexy or flashy about it. It literally is just math. You put the money here. When there's enough, you pull the money out of here. We put it here. We freed up this money. Now we put it back here until we've got enough money to do that again. Okay, it's boring, but all of the things in life that work, turns out they're boring. Breathing is pretty damn boring. You wouldn't stop doing it though because you're bored. Like, it's vital for your survival. So same thing with this. You're going to continue doing that over and over and over and over until all of the debt's gone. And the benefit of this is when all of the debt's gone, you're going to be debt free, but you're still going to have all of this money that's been growing in your sacred account. Like, you never pulled it out. So when you pull the money out finally to go invest, you have the benefit of the compounding interest over however long it took you to pay off your debt. Let's say it was a 10-year deal. If you were just buried and you were going to be in debt for 40 years and you paid it off in 10 instead, that's 10 years of compounding returns in your sacred account, plus you're debt free, plus you're not going to pay interest now, plus you've got, who knows how much cash flow, probably $2 or $3 grand of cash flow back now that you can start to recontribute again and build even more up to go invest with. Guys, that's the simplest form of investing. Like, when you look at the way the economy works, like, you don't need to go out and learn about all this stuff that you don't know about. It's right in your balance sheet already. Like, if you just handle your balance sheet, you'll make money on it. Okay. And especially the way we're doing it here. If you just pay this off, you're not making any money on it. You're going to capitalize on it by earning that compounding dividend over time. Okay. Now, a couple things. You're going to get distracted. Let's say it's a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. There will be cool things that come up in the next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be investment opportunities. There's going to be, trips, vacations, emergencies. All of this stuff's going to happen. Bitcoin, all of this stuff's going to happen. And you have to say no to all of it. You're just working the plan. Okay. Like, and that's not even just with this, guys. That's with everything. Like, I used to do bodybuilding. Guess how many times a day I had to say no? Over and over. Like, I wanted the cookies. I wanted that. You couldn't do any of that stuff because I knew the results. That's what I was going for at the end of the day. It wasn't about having a good taste in my mouth for 3 seconds. Just like it's not about 2 weeks in Hawaii. It's about financial freedom. If you can't sacrifice 2 weeks in Hawaii for financial freedom, like, I don't know what to tell you. You've got to be able to look at long-term, what's that going to do for my family and what's that going to do for my legacy? Like, when you're old and you're about to like kick the bucket, like, do you want to be like the person that left nothing behind because they spent it all on their trips and their stuff? Or do you want to be the person that your family remembers you for like 2 or 3 generations because of the way you set them up? And it starts right here. Like, this is the plane you start with. It's got to have, the control and the discipline, because the control and discipline you have here is the same exact control and discipline you need as an investor. Okay, if I'm an investor and I don't know how to just continue to repeat successful actions and I just keep getting distracted by all the cool new stuff like the Bitcoins, guess how much money I put in Bitcoin? 0. Why? Because it wasn't around 30 years ago. If it's around in 30 more years, yeah, I'll look at it because now it's got a track record, but I know real estate's been there. I know the sacred account's been there. I know my business is going to be there. I know, all of these historically proven opportunities are going to be there. That's what I'm going to do. And I have to be able to do that with consistency and discipline and really cut the distractions out. And this helps you practice that habit. So I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. So just to kind of give you, again, just a visual. So you've got money, you've got debt. You're putting your money as a split. Part of it's going to your sacred account. Part of it is going to the debt. Okay, so super simple right there. You're paying minimums only. As soon as you've got enough, you're going to borrow from that sacred account to pay off the smallest debt. And that debt's gone. You've now freed up the cash flow. The sacred account is still growing. You're still earning dividends. That cash flow you freed up is going to pay the sacred account off. You're paying your loan off early. You continue contributing. And then you continue to just repeat those steps over and over on each debt till all of them are gone. Once they're all gone, you've got money in the account. You can go invest. And that really is the simplicity of the plan. And if you just keep working that, like, you're going to be fine. So the result, by the time you're done with this, you should have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, depending on how long this takes you, of dollars in your sacred account that have been growing this entire time. So keep in mind, like if you started with $1,000 a month that you're putting in the front end and you're periodically paying off these debts and putting all of the cash flow, most people have 1,500 to $3,000 a month in debt payments that are all freed up now, that are all going into the account, that are all also earning 6 to 8% in dividends. So you have that working for you. You are debt free, which means your balance sheet looks really good. You've got a great net worth at this point. And I don't talk to like as a coach, I don't talk to a lot of people that have a positive net worth. Like you don't see that very often. You see a lot of people that are upside down. They have, barely any money left over at the end of the month. That's the average American right now. So just that is a win. Like we're talking long-term wealth, but imagine 5 years, no debt, no payments. You've got bunches of money left over and you can actually go invest now. Okay. And then you can save thousands of interests. Thousands and thousands of dollars in interest. I've had people that had, like 250,000 in student loans that if they kept going at the rate they're going, they would literally pay over $1 million in interest. Like think about that, paying over $1 million in interest so that you can go to school. They will never pay that thing off. And here's the deal. If you have a student loan and your parents co-signed or your spouse co-signed, when you die, guess who gets that debt? Your co-signer. Okay, you cannot get rid of a student loan if you file for bankruptcy. You can't get it pulled off your credit. Like that thing is stuck with you forever. Like I think it was a stat from 2014. We had it last year. So if you took like the amount of money that the federal government makes in interest off student loans and you compared it against other companies in the country, it was the second most profitable company in the US, next to ExxonMobil. That's the amount of money they're bringing in on student loans. So when you think about saving thousands of dollars in interest, it might not seem real to you because you only see like a $300 a month payment or a $500 per month payment. But if you look at the amortization schedules, and you can do this on your mortgage too, you look at the amortization schedules of how much money goes to interest and how much money goes to principal, the majority of what you pay is interest. And usually you're never going to get through it. You're going to always just pay interest. Which word? Amortization. So amortization is basically it's a month by month breakdown of your payment. It will show you how many dollars go to principal and how many dollars go to interest. Okay, so like a mortgage, for example, these are like mortgages are killer. This is why banks lend mortgages so much. So a mortgage, they'll tell you have a 5% interest rate, right? Or a 4% interest rate. And you do, but what they don't tell you is the first several years of payments is probably 90 to 95% of your overall payment is only interest. Meaning you're not reducing any of your principal. So they're stacking it on the front end so that the 5% interest, that's really what you're paying on the back end. On the front end, you're paying like 80, 90% in interest. You have no idea because it's just a $1,200 a month payment you make. The money stays the same. And this is something I was taught this quote, I think 4 years ago. It stuck with me. Poor people think about percentages. Wealthy people think about denominators. So banks will market, think about it. How many times have you heard APR, or interest rate, percent with mortgages, auto loans, credit cards? Because they know you think, if you're thinking that way, they're like, yeah, all they care about is percentages. So if we tell them it's a low APR, they're like, man, that's a low percent. Well, banks know they don't pay their bills in percent. They don't cash flow in percent. They cash flow and pay bills in dollars. And so they know that if they can make dollars and they just fix the interest rate a certain way, they can advertise that APR or that percentage on the mortgage. But if they show you the AM, and most people never look at it. Most people never look at it because they don't understand it, or it's one of those skeletons in the closet. Like they just don't want to confront it. They know it's bad, so they never look at it. But the thing is if you never look at it, you can't fix it. Oh, the one you told me about? It was like some realtor posted is like, when you buy a home, don't let the logic take over your emotions. It's like, should outweigh the logic. It's like, that's a terrible way to buy anything. So you've saved thousands of dollars in interest. And guys, the interest is a rate of return. Like I've talked about, if you saved interest you were going to pay, that is a rate of return. You need to look at it that way. Okay. You've freed up cash flow. And then the alternatives here, you could be, this is option number 2. You could be debt-free, broke, and going back in debt. Okay, that's if we do it like the Dave Ramsey way. That's if we do it the way most people are going to try and pay off their debt. They're going to say, hey, everything is on hold. I'm only focusing on debt. They're going to get out really fast, and then they're going to end up right back in debt. And that method, it doesn't really work with anything. It's like if you ran a marathon and you're like, man, I'm going to sprint, like you'll last how many miles? Like 5, maybe. Then you'll be gassed and you still got 20 miles to go. Mike's like, shoot, I would last like a quarter mile. So like you look at it that way, like it's not this sprint. You have to have an overall strategy. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to just gung ho and put a bunch of power behind it and hope it works. You will get burnt out. Stuff will happen and you're going to end up right back to where you started. Okay. Or the other option, this is the other option, people that don't even want to handle it. Do nothing and never get ahead. Never try and handle the credit card. Never try and have a strategy. Never try and do anything. And debt's just something we accept, and we're going to go into apathy about it because everyone has it and there's no way out. Like that's a terrible mindset to have. So when you're doing this, like A, you have to make the decision that, all right, wealth is a priority and it's something that actually matters to me. B, I'm going to use a strategy that's actually like mathematically proven and it's based on longevity, not just emotions and advertising and how I want to do it. And then C, like I'm going to keep my focus on the long term of what I'm trying to create. Okay, ultimately, like we're talking about tonight, getting out of debt is a priority, but debt freedom and financial freedom are not the same thing. I know tons of people that are going to be out of debt that will never be wealthy because they put all their attention on getting out of debt and they never put it on how do I multiply my money. Because like we talked about at the beginning, debt is not a debt problem, it's an income problem. If you had debt, it's because you didn't have money. You don't fix that, then this is never going to get solved. Anytime you've had to borrow for consumer debt, bad debt, it's always because I didn't have money earned and I did not have money saved. Investment debt, that's different, but this is not investment debt that we're talking about right now. We're talking about bad decisions we put on a credit card or bad decisions we borrow money for. So ultimately, like these are the steps you've got to take. And the beauty of this is it's simple. It does not have to be complex. Like a lot of times we overcomplicate things. We get on Excel and we try and make it look way cooler than it has to be. And it just makes it complex and it's not going to work. So you pick something simple that works and you just work it over and over and over. Okay. So that's all we have for you guys tonight. I do want to leave it open. Do you have any questions in the room or in the comments? So with bankruptcy, basically when you file, they can't collect on you, but usually you still got to make some sort of restoration. And also if you file bankruptcy, like that's a super short-term way. That's like instead of losing weight, getting liposuction. At the end of the day, you eat too many donuts and cheeseburgers and don't work out. Like you're going to go right back to where you started. So the bankruptcy is not really going to fix anything. Temporarily, it might get rid of it. But again, like if you filed bankruptcy and you went to a lender and they see that bankruptcy on your record, they're not going to lend to you for, I think it's 7 years till that thing falls off. So, I mean, you can, if your head's below water that far and it's the only way out, that's what it's for. But if you are just irresponsible and don't want to pay the payments back, it's a terrible idea. Super short-sighted. I would never recommend somebody does that.
Turn and flip in multi-unit apartment with the VA loan, 0 down, with the F-35s coming. Blah, blah, blah. That's if it's a good plan, basically, to invest in multi-unit on 0 down.
Not on 0 down. Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so what he's saying, so this is
James, one of my clients.
Is that Fairbanks? Yeah.
Thousands of trips are going to be up there, right? But we wanted to ask about putting 0 down. So, hey, James, you put 0 money down on any property, you're going to be over leveraged. So you have 0 equity in that deal, and you'll be paying the first 5 years just to get out the interest. Like you're not going to get any cash flow. You could get some cash flow, but ultimately, like
yeah. So the problem with 0 down is when you have no money going into it. That means you have 100% leverage. And what that equates to is your payments are literally as high as they could possibly be. So you've got high payments that you have to meet. Okay, in addition to that, like you're probably not doing 0 down on commercial property. And when I say probably, I'm being nice. You're definitely not doing 0 down on commercial property. You're doing it on residential property. What that means is it's no different than the Valley right now. How many detached fourplexes have you guys seen thrown down in the valley in like the last 5 years? Stupid, right? Like the first guy was like, man, it's a boom. And they threw a bunch of them down. Then everyone bought one. So in the next 3 to 5 years in Wasilla, what you're going to see is a bunch of negative cash flow landlords that didn't really want to be landlords, not making money. They're going to sell for pennies on the dollar and lose their asses on the property. That's what will happen. Fairbanks will be no different. 0% down. All of the soldiers will come up to work on the F-35s. That's going to die down and boom. Everything is done. You're now stuck with a $600,000 mortgage that's not cash flowing, that nobody wants because they're all over the place out there. So I wouldn't do it. What you actually want to look for in Alaska, like, it's tough, but we do live in a terrible real estate market. It's overpriced. We don't cash flow. All of our multifamily is deferred maintenance. It's going to, Widener owns it all. And if they get rid of it, you don't want to touch it for like 5 years till they fix it all and get it done, right? Or it's in Fairview. Yeah, you don't want to be in Fairview. You'll get bed bugs and bullets. So basically, you want to avoid investing in brand new property, and you also want to avoid investing in property that's been around since the 1970s and 80s, because you're going to inherit all of the expenses on it. So you're looking at like 5 to 10 year builds that are relatively new. Just like if you're looking at a used vehicle, like all of the expense is kind of gone, and they're in that spot where it's not going to be super expensive to continually own. And the problem is, like, in a brand new market like that, as they're building, it's going to artificially shove prices up. You'll overpay for the property. You'll have too high of a mortgage payment. And then you're going to be stuck at, again, like Mike said, 0 down. And you can't, on a VA, you can't sell it right away, right? So you have to hold it for a year. So if you have a VA, like your negative cash flow, you're stuck with that thing. And you have to live in it for 12 months.
Who wants to live free in a little fourplex on all good?
Yeah, or Fairbanks. I mean, really, there's Fairbanks is bipolar, man. 96 in the summer, in the wintertime, it's like negative 40. So I hope that answers your question, James. And I don't want to discourage you as an investor. Like, you just have to really look at the numbers rather than the opportunities. I'm probably like the most skeptical investor you will ever talk to, because as soon as it sounds flashy, I'm like, show me the numbers or I'm out. Like, as soon as it sounds really cool, I'm like, yeah, you can't show me 3 years of income, I'm not touching it. So that's the other thing with new builds, is you don't actually know that it's going to pan out, because there's no historical proof that those will be rented. It's all speculation at that point.
We have one initial question, but I'm trying to get more clarification. Daryl is asking, do you structure this the same way if you're doing payouts from your business? For example, paying yourself a salary of the company to pay down personal debt. Obviously, if he's a general manager of his LLC, would you suggest doing that the same way without?
It's not going to change too much. Like, if you're a business owner and you're paying yourself, ultimately you still are paying debt down. I think the real question becomes, how do you pay yourself? So if you're paying yourself as a sole proprietor, and this is more taxes, you're going to pay income tax and you're going to pay self-employment tax. You're being double taxed. So if you're paying yourself, you want to ideally do it through an S corp. So you've got a minimum base salary. That's the only step you're paying self-employment tax on, and then you can pay yourself dividends, profits, bonuses. The other thing you can do as a business owner, and this is super off in the weeds, if you're a business owner and you do have profit, the business already paid taxes on the profit, right? So if you paid taxes on the profit already, you can stick the profit into a sacred account, borrow against it, lend the money to yourself, because the IRS can't tax a loan. And then you can write off the interest on your taxes as well. And you can get away with that scot-free and just pay yourself back over time. Or if the business needs a tax write-off, you default on yourself and write it off as well. So there's different there's different ways you can handle that. But that's less of a debt payment question. That's more of a tax question. Yeah. Good book. All right, guys. So any more questions? Perfect. So we're going to wrap up for tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's been an awesome Friday night. If you have questions on anything we covered, go to sacredaccountant.com. That thing is full of information. Reach out to us if you want to learn more. Make sure that you do like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk to you guys next Friday.